So now that we understand sort of what unions want, which is benefits, and what unions can have, their constraints, right? Let's discuss some of the means by which unions get what they want. So we'll start with a simple model of membership and use that to help explain the decline in union membership over the last few decades. Then we'll discuss the political means by which unions alter the market constraints that employers face. And finally, we'll analyze so-called ultimate threats such as strikes. Okay, so we can analyze union membership with a simple supply and demand graph. Okay, on the demand side of this market is the employees' desire to be a union member, okay, which is a function of the price of union membership, right? The price of union membership includes the obvious union dues and initiation fees, but also the value of the time that the individual would be expected to spend on union activities, so going to meetings and that kind of stuff, right? Other things being equal, the higher the union dues, the less likely someone is going to be to join a union, right? The lower the union dues, again, everything else being equal, right? The more likely they are to join a union. And we can say the same thing about the number of meetings, right? The number of meetings that someone is required to attend, if that is high, right, we would say that's a high price of membership, and so fewer people would want to be in the union. If the union requires very few meetings per year or per month or whatever, then the quantity demanded for unions rises. Now, it's also costly to represent members of a union, both in terms of the time requirements for union representatives and in terms of gathering the information about what the union members want to see changed. And so as a result of this, it's reasonable to conclude that there's an upward sloping supply curve. So the supply curve would be the representatives willingness to, quote unquote, produce union benefits. Right? If they're getting paid more, they're going to be more willing to provide union benefits, right? And so the intersection of these two curves, of the demand for union membership and the supply for union membership, gives us the equilibrium price and quantity, so the equilibrium price of joining the union and the equilibrium number of people that actually join the union, okay? But what factors determine sort of the position of these curves, right? Anything that causes either the demand curve or the supply curve to shift to the right or increase will increase the number of union workers in an economy, and anything that causes either curve to shift to the left will cause a decline in union membership. So on the demand curve, anything that causes people to change their expected benefit of joining the union will cause the curve to shift either right or left. If people expect that there will be higher benefits from joining the union, they will be more willing to join the union and will be willing to pay a higher price for membership, right? So here we're just increasing the demand for membership, for unions, and as a result, the price of unions goes up and the number of people in the union predictably would increase, right? Similarly, if the expected benefits of joining a union decrease, right, then the demand for unions will decrease, resulting in fewer people joining the union and a lower price of union dues, right? On the supply side, let's draw a new one. On the supply side, anything that influences the cost of union organization activity will shift the supply curve either right or to the left. So introduction of new legislation that makes it easier for unions to win representation elections will shift the supply curve to the right. right? And as a result, there will be more people in the union, and union prices or union dues will decrease, right? And similarly, changes in the legislation that make it harder for unions to organize, well, those will shift the supply to the left, right? Also, changes in the composition of employment that make it more difficult to organize the workforce will shift the supply curve for unions to the left, and predictably will have higher union dues and fewer people in them. But broadly speaking, there are 5 factors that have decreased either the demand for union membership or the supply of union membership since approximately 1950. So we've seen demographic changes, in the labor force, right? So women historically do not join labor unions for one reason or another, and have so reduced the overall demand for union services, right? So more women in the workforce who typically do not join labor unions has decreased the overall demand for unions, right? The second one is a shifting industrial mix. Okay? And so here, industries that were most heavily unionized in the past, like manufacturing, now actually employ fewer people and more machines to do their work. At the same time, industries such as insurance, finance, real estate, and other service industries have seen large increases in employment and have historically been the least unionized owing to the high elasticity of labor demand in these industries. Okay, and so just a shift in what industries are thriving and what industries are attracting employees, and whether or not those industries are conducive to unions, right? The third one would be regional shifts in employment. Okay, so here people have tended to move to states that are least friendly towards unions for one reason or another, reducing the supply, reducing the demand for labor union services. Fourth would be competitive pressures. Right? So foreign competition has greatly reduced the power of unions to secure benefits for their employees, sharply reducing the supply of union membership. Right? So again, supply shifts left. Right? And then finally, general increases in employer resistance. That's an A. Right? So generally speaking, with the rise of unions in the 40s and 50s, employers began to invest more heavily in anti-union countermeasures. Now this reduced the supply of unions for sure, but it probably also reduced the demand for unions by increasing sort of the social stigma of joining a union. So your boss or other, high income earners might have tried to make you feel bad, or make lower income workers feel bad about unionizing, right? Creating a sort of social stigma against unions. Okay. Now, so those are sort of the 5 reasons why union membership has been on the decline lately. Let's go through some things that unions do to sort of try to protect themselves, right? To sort of protect their base. Now, aside from the provision of benefits that they can to attract workers to join a union, unions can also attempt to increase demand for union labor or reduce the elasticity of demand for labor as a means of increasing their bargaining power. So remember, people want to join a labor union. So people want to join a union when it is beneficial. right? People want to join a union when it's beneficial to do so. And so, how can labor unions increase the amount of benefits that they provide? Well, one way is to reduce the elasticity of the demand curve for labor. Right now, how can they do this? Okay, one way to do this is by providing training. So they can provide training to union members. Right? Doing this makes union workers more productive than non-union workers and will likely increase the employer's demand for union workers and also increase the demand for union membership among employees, right? So this could attract people to join the union, okay? But another way they can do it is they can support legislation that increases labor demand in general. So, for example, they can support tariffs and or quotas, right? The basic Buy American slogan, right? By supporting tariffs and quotas, what they're effectively doing is they're restricting the number of things that we can import from foreign countries. And if we've restricted the number of things we can import from foreign companies, what that means is that we are increasing the number of things that are produced domestically, right? Increases in the number of things produced domestically will increase the number of jobs, right? Increased number of jobs, right? Well, that will be reflected by the increased demand for labor, and so the union would gain support or gain strength by potentially having a larger pool from which to draw from. So they have more people that work in industries that they represent that they could potentially try to convince to join the union. Okay, so let's imagine what the UAW would do, right? The UAW would probably want to restrict Honda and Toyota from selling cars in the U.S. The reason why is because that would force American consumers to buy more Ford, GM, and Chrysler cars, right? And again, I'm oversimplifying. I'm imagining that Honda and Toyota are made in Japan and China, right? They're not made in the U.S. I know today they are. Let's simplify the world, okay? So Japan makes all the Toyotas and Hondas. The U.S. makes all the Ford, Chryslers, and GM cars, okay? And so if the UAW were able to pass a tariff or a quota that limits the number of Japanese cars that come into the U.S., that would increase the demand for American car workers, right? And now there'd be more American car workers working in the factories, and the union would have more people that would potentially join, okay? Now the other thing that unions can do, and I don't mean to pick on the UAW. So if you're in the UAW, great, that's fine. I'm not trying to call you evil or anything like that. I'm just using you as an example. Okay, this is clearly I'm pretending that you are the only one that do this sort of stuff. I'm not trying to pick on you, so I apologize. Right? I'm just using you as an example. What unions can also do is they can support legislation that restricts substituting capital or machines for labor. Okay? This has the effect of making the labor demand curve more inelastic because there are now fewer substitutes for labor, right? And so some examples of this, right? Construction unions in various states, have successfully lobbied to require workers to be paid the prevailing wage in that state, which is often set at the union wage rate. And so this means that a non-union potential employee cannot legally work for less than the union wage, right? Which is effectively reducing the ability of employers to find cheaper substitutes for union workers. We've also seen labor unions, particularly in airline, railroad, and printing industries, secure sort of minimum crew size. Regulations or legislation. For example, on some commercial flights, it is required that there are at least 3 pilots on board at all times, right? So you no longer just have the pilot and the co-pilot, but you have a pilot, a co-pilot, and a backup co-pilot, right? And finally, most famously perhaps, unions are able to leverage the fact that they represent many people simultaneously to impose costs on management, right? For example, workers may agree to slow down, right, at work. Or maybe they'll take longer bathroom breaks. Right? Or just generally not try as hard as they possibly could. Maybe they'll shirk collectively, right? And given that it's costly to find new workers to replace these people, and that this cannot be done, instantly, this can and does impose significant costs on the employer. The larger the number of union workers in a particular firm or industry, the greater these costs will be, right? Now these sort of slowdowns or taking longer bathroom breaks, or even like strike would be the ultimate. Strike is just like a complete and utter slowdown to zero work, right? These are relatively rare, despite all the media attention that they're given, on television, right? Now that said, we do see them from time to time. So Walmart workers went on strike a few years ago, and then just a few weeks ago, or just a few months ago now, adjunct professors around the country walked out in protest for their low wages, right? And these adjuncts, or as some people have taken to calling them madjuncts, which I think is a clever play on words. These adjuncts are upset about their working conditions. Some of them make as little as $1,500 for each class that they teach over the entire semester. So imagine working for 15 weeks, teaching a class for 3 hours a week. So that's 45 hours that you have to talk. Plus, Lord only knows how much prep time is involved. Well, I know how much prep time is involved, but and you only make $1,500 for that, right? Those people are understandably upset. Now, the longer the strike or the slowdown or the longer bathroom breaks or whatever, the longer this lasts, the greater the costs are to the employer. Now, this has 2 effects. On the one hand, it should make the employer more likely. So there are 2 effects of a long-lasting strike. One, it imposes serious costs and should make the employer more likely to cave, right? And give in. Oops, that's a 2. And give in to the employer or the employee's demands. On the other hand, the longer the strike goes, the more able the firm is to find new workers, right? In a famous case, a Rhode Island school district fired every single teacher at a high school when they failed to reach an agreement with the teachers' union. So using the strike method is a double-edged sword. While it can be effective in getting what union members want, it can also lead to union members all being fired, which I submit is something that they don't want to have happen, right? No union member really wants to get fired, okay?